Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
She's an extraordinary woman, our next guest. Very well known, of course, internationally known as an investigative journalist, author and documentary filmmaker. She's also a pretty good radio presenter as well, and she'll talk about her radio programme at some stage today. She's known, of course, for her work in investigating the phenomenon of ufology, or extraterrestrial visitation, contact, and she's also investigated and presented evidence that the US government is colluding with aliens. Now, her CV, as we would say, her resume, is very long and very detailed and very impressive, and I could be here giving it to you for a while, but I am going to recommend you go to her website, which is earthfiles.com. That's earthfiles.com. Let's welcome to the programme Linda Moulton, Howe. Linda, welcome to the programme. How are you?
Hi, Richie. It's nice to be here with you, and thank you for the very nice introduction. And for people listening, I would like everyone to know that throughout all of my work, I have always gone the beat of an investigative reporter who is always focused on science, environment, and medicine. Even in that context, are we on Earth interacting with an alien presence? And is there evidence, growing evidence, that out in the Milky Way galaxy and many other galaxies beyond, that we are getting increasing numbers of papers from physicists who are saying that there are strange, unexplained signals in various places in the cosmos? All of that relates to the work that I have been doing since I graduated from Stanford University with a master's degree in communication. And all of the work I did at Stanford was in science, medicine, and the environment. I went on into news in science, medicine, and the environment. And it was my going into the strange animal mutilation phenomena of the world, trying to understand what could take down a 2,000-pound bull and not leave any tracks around the animal's body, no blood or fluid anywhere on the strange pattern of excisions. And it was law enforcement that told me, when I was head of the special projects unit at the CBS station in Denver, making documentaries each year, it was law enforcement, sheriffs and deputies, who had been investigating worldwide bloodless, trackless animal mutilations since the early 60s, who said, Linda, we'll save you some time.
Wow.
The perpetrators of these worldwide animal mutilations are creatures from outer space, quote, unquote. And that, Richie, is why, as a manager in a TV station responsible for doing science, medicine, and environment documentaries and journalism and news reports, that I started on the absolute most difficult path that I can think any human could try. And that is to get to the bottom of what the UK government, the US government, all of the allies of World War II, what do they know about an alien presence? And why did Prime Minister Churchill, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, FDR, Truman, and that whole crowd, why did they decide that they would rather lie and have 50 to 75 years of a policy of denial about something they knew was true, because they were afraid of upending the civilization of humans on this planet? And what I've just said to you, I think, is a summary of what has happened.
Brilliant that you explained how you got into it, because obviously I'm thinking of some of our listeners whom are new to it and might not have heard of you, even though, as I said at the beginning, and I wasn't in any way buttering you up, you are internationally known, and it's why you travel around the world to these conferences. And but there will be people new to this information. The animal mutilations, I mean, it's absolutely fascinating, this. It's horrible at once, it's horrible and spooky and sinister. At the same time, it's fascinating. Can we talk a little bit more about that, Linda, and how widespread that was and is? And without being, I suppose, too gory and upsetting people, what was happening to these animals?
All right. The first worldwide, and it went worldwide, if you want to go back to September of 1967, there were radio broadcasts. It made some of the TV news on September 7th. I think it was September 7th, 1967, if I'm remembering correctly. This was a horse. Her name was Lady. A reporter in southern Colorado, in talking with farmers and ranchers, got the sex wrong, got the name wrong. Before he died, I got to personally talk with the owner of this horse that I'm going to describe in a moment. His name was Burl Lewis. Burl lived with his wife, Nellie, on a big ranch in a place called Alamosa, Colorado. If you go to a U.S. map, you go to Colorado, you go to Denver, go down almost straight south, and a little to the west, at the bottom of the state of Colorado, not far from the New Mexico border, and you will see Alamosa and the great sand dunes in that area, which has had many, many animal mutilations since this one that went worldwide in 67. But this is a perfect one to start off with in description, because the high strangeness is what was hitting law enforcement right from the beginning. They'd had many other animal mutilations before this one. They just weren't talking. This is the one that went worldwide because Burl and Nellie Lewis were known so well by the community, and they talked with the local newspaper, and they did the first story, and that's what went around the world. Here is what happened. Nellie's favorite horse was this female Appaloosa called Lady, not Snippy. That was a reporter's mistake. Said it was a male gelding named Snippy. That was all wrong. It was a female Appaloosa named Lady, and Lady was Nellie Lewis's favorite horse. She saw this horse, fed this horse, washed this horse. She loved this horse like a part of the family. And one night, a couple of days before September 7th, she couldn't find Nellie, or couldn't find the horse that was missing, Lady. And so her husband knew, her family knew, and they just kept assuming that maybe Lady had gone off on some, adventure and would come back. But as each hour went by after the first day and night, they became extremely worried. And Burl Lewis started searching and sending people out to search. And in some sand dunes, a few miles from the ranch house, they found Lady. But I'm going to start with what they found first. About 100 feet from her body, there were dozens of hoof prints of a horse, as if the horse had reared up. So the front legs are up. The back legs, the hooves of only the back legs, are making a circle of dozens of imprints in the pure sand dune type soil of that area. 100 feet they walk because they could see the horse. There was not a single track between the circle of those back hooves and her body. And when they got to her body, they could see that there was not a single hoof mark, not hers, not anything else's, around a body that they could not comprehend what they were looking at. The entire neck and head of Lady was stripped of all flesh, everything down to bone. But the rest of the body of the horse looked so fresh and so untouched that one person said it was as if this horse, even though there was nothing but bone, should still be able to get up because the horse looked so alive outside of all of the missing tissue from the lower neck up. Then, in the chest, a doctor who was a hematologist and pathologist working in Denver, Colorado at the time at the University of Colorado Medical Center. His name was John Altshuler. Nobody knew about him in 67, but he heard about the strange horse death and that there were calls for any expert medical help because Burl and Nellie Lewis left this horse where they found it for quite a while. And Dr. Altshuler decided secretly, because he did not want to jeopardize anything in his medical career because he had a wife and kids. He drove down without anyone knowing. He went to the site. He met Burl and Nellie Lewis. He went out to the horse. He asked them to only refer to him as a doctor from Denver. And in some of the newspapers from that period of time, you will hear about the mysterious doctor from Denver. Well, I'm telling you who it was. Dr. John Altshuler, MD, very, very successful and extremely competent hematologist and pathologist until he died in his 70s. And he comes to work with me in Denver, Colorado in the 80s into the 90s on animal mutilations because of his private trip to see this horse named Lady near Alamosa on the Burl and Nellie Lewis, their ranch. And he tells me what it is that he saw. And he gave me permission to put his first and only professional statement on the record in my first book, An Alien Harvest, that came out in 1989. Everything I'm telling you is in that book with photographs and with the statement by Dr. Altshuler that when he knelt down beside this horse that had no neck flesh and no head flesh, he was looking at a chest, the mediastinum, in which it was open and every single major organ from the lungs, the heart, gallbladder, all of it was gone.
And no sign of it, Linda. It didn't turn up somewhere else, the tissue that was missing.
Oh, no. And he's examining as a trained medical doctor who is a hematologist and a pathologist and being able to put his hands inside the chest of this horse. And he realizes that where the heart and the lungs and the stomach and the diaphragm and the gallbladder and everything were, he is seeing absolutely perfect bloodless excisions. And there is not a drop of hemoglobin in the chest of this horse, at which point he knew then in 1967 that he was at the site of something that was impossible to explain by any human medicine of any kind. And he wrote his notes, did a diary, talked with people, and no one until I did my book, An Alien Harvest in 1989, ever heard from him in his own words about the impossible, but there it was, mutilation of the horse Lady. Now, when we started working together, there had been literally, the estimate is, conservative estimate, that between the 60s and when I did my film, A Strange Harvest, about the animal mutilation phenomena, starting in the fall of 79, it was first broadcast as a 90-minute special on the CBS station in Colorado on May 25th, 1980. So between the early 60s and 1980, it was estimated by law enforcement that there had been at least 10,000 animal mutilations in North America alone.
That's an incredible number, Linda.
Okay, and right now I can send you the data. SENASA in Argentina, Brazil, but specifically in Argentina. SENASA is their version of the Department of Agriculture that we have in the United States. Between the year 2002 and approximately 2007, a 5-year period, they announced that from veterinarians and from farmers in Argentina, they had reported at least 3,000 bloodless, trackless animal mutilations. I've reported about this endlessly, but to leverage the so-called mainstream New York, Washington, D.C., L.A. Media to take this seriously has proved to me astonishing. I am an Emmy award-winning, Peabody award-winning, Ohio State award-winning, many festivals award-winning producer, writer, director, editor. I go by the same rules that the New York Times investigative reporters go by. And I have reported and shown and have been asked to make presentations at National Veterinarian Association meetings with sheriffs. And you cannot get the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Boston Globe. You cannot get them to cover it. You can't get NBC, ABC, CBS, and CNN and MSNBC and all of that to cover it. And it is even difficult to penetrate the so-called media around the world in radio, because most people are terrified of having their reputations or their profession somehow hurt by actually reporting forensic evidence. That's what I have been doing.
Fear of ridicule, Linda. Now, right. You're telling me that you and I are having a chat now. It's great to have you on the program. It's earthfiles.com, Linda's website. She'll be here in Manchester real soon. We'll tell you more about that shortly as well. You're telling me that as you and I are talking tonight, and this is brand new to me now. I'd heard bits and pieces over the years, but I told you today, honestly, it's a new area of research for me. I'm fascinated by it. I'm thrilled by it, but I know very little about it. So tonight, farmers in different parts of the world will come across animals mutilated like this, Linda, and they will be scratching their heads. They won't know what's going on.
Absolutely. I just did 2 days ago an earthfiles.com report about all of the bloodless half-cat mutilations that are going on around London and Manchester right now in England. In the United States, I have talked with farmers in Oregon, in the eastern part of Oregon. They had a mutilation that I have photos. And these are reports that I put in the Real X-Files by subscription only on purpose at Earth Files, because I want the people who genuinely are trying to understand what is really happening on this planet, this solar system, and this universe to be able to see for themselves what animal mutilations look like. And so in the Real X-Files section of earthfiles.com, which also has hundreds of reports in science and medicine and the environment, the Real X-Files, you can see for yourself. And right now, I'm past the 2,500 report list at Earth Files. I'm thrilled by that. And if you go and do a quick search, you will see that in animal mutilations alone, whether it's cats, whether it's dogs, deer, elk, marmots, every domestic animal you can think of. Most people only hear about horse and cattle mutilations. It's every single animal you have ever heard. Right now in the area of around London, there have been foxes, there have been a royal python, there's a royal monitor lizard, cattle, goats, sheep, and then the half cats. The half cats are literally physically cut right in half. Wow. And there is no blood. There is no blood on the hair. There is no blood in the carcass. They are cut in half. And I worked with John Altschuler on one of these when in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada in the early 1990s, they had something like 37 half cats reported to various veterinarians and the Humane Society in Vancouver. And Dr. Altschuler said, please get me one of those half cats. Sometimes the front half with the head, the ears, it looks like a puppet. Everything is taken out. Everything in the throat, the upper chest, it's all gone. It's like a hand puppet. There's no blood. It's totally dry. And so we got the front half of a cat. It was an Angora cat. And Dr. Altschuler had been doing the same examinations in the large animals and other animals beyond cats and finding and reporting and showing in my book, An Alien Harvest. You can see the medical forensic evidence from a microscope that shows the collagen is cooked, The hemoglobin is cooked
Wow.
at the excision lines of every animal I am talking to you about. And when we got the half cat from Vancouver in the early 90s, which is all of this that I'm discussing, every single thing I've said to you, all of this is at myearthfiles.com. It is a news website I have been doing since 1999. It now has exceeded 2,500 in-depth reports, about 60,000 different photos, maps, illustrations, and I like documents and I like evidence that comes from people who are doctors and forensic explorers. And all of this, the half cat from Vancouver, in that report at Earth Files, you can see the half cat, you can see x-rays of half cats, and Dr. Altshuler was able to show medically that the excision of the half cat, the entire excision of this half cat, had been, the collagen was cooked and the hemoglobin was cooked. So it means it's an instrument of some sort that is cutting with high heat. But here's the kicker again.
Just before you get to that, Linda, let me just jump in because we're getting lots and lots of questions on this. We're also getting tweets from people. We get hundreds of tweets during the programme. We're getting a lot of tweets from people who they're hearing you loud and clear, and they're saying that they've come across this here in the UK. I've heard from Alex Doust, I've heard from others who are saying that they heard this. Before you get to that, I'm of the belief, I've come to believe, reluctantly, it must be said, I used to fight against considering this, but that malevolent, interdimensional beings have attempted to and have succeeded in some way to manipulating our reality. Is there any, or has there any consideration been given to maybe it's non-physical beings that have managed to do this? And that would explain the lack of physical evidence, footprints or handprints, that it could be interdimensional, non-physical beings. Has that been considered?
Richie, if you receive from me at least 3 of the 4 books I've done, they're 8.5 by 11. They have 400 some pages each book. Photographs throughout, documents throughout, forensic evidence throughout, illustrations throughout, maps throughout. Every single thing is footnoted and documented. Would you read my 3 large books on the question you just asked, on the animal mutilations, human abduction syndrome, and other intelligences in this universe coming to me through whistleblowers who have worked in the American intel and military that describe both friendlies and extremely hostile other intelligences our government is dealing with right now? The UK government has been very closely involved with the United States on this since World War II. So has Australia and Canada, the World War II allies. And it is the biggest dark secret that not only is the universe teeming with life, and for people who say, well, then why aren't we getting the signals? It is a naive, provincial attitude of Homo sapiens sapien on Earth, that what we would assume advanced intelligences out in the cosmos would do is completely naive. There are hostiles. Reagan was introduced to that in a briefing. And there are friendly allies. It is extremely complicated, and to the heart of the question you just asked about other dimensional intelligences that could fall into the category of hostile intentions, I think the answer is yes. I know that there are people who have worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency in this government who communicated with me directly in the early 1990s through FedEx. And what they said to me, I reported in my book's Glimpses of Other Realities. It's a 2-volume book that I did over 8 years. Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 1, Facts and Eyewitnesses, goes for about 400 pages, and then Volume 2 goes for another 380 pages. It's Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness. I go into the entire communication from the DIA, NSA people who were active, and they raised a huge number of questions, but perhaps most directly to your question is a statement that you can read for yourself in my books. It's also at earthfiles.com in stories that I have done about this. They said, we are dealing with some of the phenomena that are hostile. And the way they used the phrase was, they are neither benign nor neutral.
Right.
Now, what is the vested interest of an advanced intelligence that can fold space-time, because that's how they move? We only know Euclidean geometry. You get in a car or a plane or a boat, and you have to spend a lot of time moving along a line around the ball that is Earth. That's the only way humans currently know how to move.
Yeah, and you and I both know that time isn't linear. We know that. And any intelligences greater than ours have no doubt they can manipulate time. Why would they be doing these things to these animals, Linda? Why?
Richie, just let me finish this because this is very important. If we are linear Euclidean geometry that takes so much time on Earth, it is established for me that we are dealing with intelligences in this universe that know already how to control gravity. They know how to bend space-time. Einstein, this is absolutely consistent with Einsteinian physics. If you can control gravity, you can bend space-time. If you can bend space-time, you can move point to point. You can move from 13.7 billion light years from Earth to Earth by stepping through a doorway. And
Absolutely.
That has been described in the abduction syndrome over and over. We're in a completely different physics than anything humans are prepared to understand at this point in our evolution. And why animal mutilations? 2 reasons were given to me a long time ago. I write about it in huge depth in An Alien Harvest, my first book. And these other 2 I told you about, the 2-volume Glimpses of Other Realities. But this is the bottom line. There are non-humans out there that use tissue, fluid, and various other things on this planet and many other planets for sustenance. That is a nice word that covers a very large territory for what we as humans on this planet call eating food. The second category is genetic harvesting. The genetic harvesting is for rapid cycle cloning of body containers of any kind that the intelligences want, literally, to inhabit either as androids or to inhabit as we might put on a costume or military camouflage. And here you're getting to the most difficult area of all. One man told me in 1983 at a military base when I was starting on trying to do a project, an hour documentary from home box office in New York. And our working title at HBO was the story I was going to try to tell as a documentary filmmaker, UFOs, the ET Factor. And it's a long story covered in depth with all kinds of documentation in my first book, An Alien Harvest, about the HBO project, what happened, my interactions with military and government. And what I'm telling you now is that one of the people that I talked to said these words that I've never forgotten. The U.S. government's greatest concern is who walks on this planet, looks human, and is not. Close quote.
Right. I'm going to do a quick recap, by the way. Earthfiles.com is Linda's website. Awakening, the UFO and Conscious Life Expo at Bowler's Exhibition Centre in Manchester is on Saturday, March 4th from 9 a.m. right up until 7 p.m. Great speakers. Linda, of course, Eric von Daniken, Gary Heseltine among the speakers talking on the day. I'll be there myself. I'm going to, because I've known Eric von Daniken for a little bit, so I'm going to pop out there and say hello to him and to you, Linda. It's exactly 27 minutes to the top of the hour. Linda, when I say we believe, I'm not speaking for anybody, I should speak for myself. I subscribe to the holographic universe theory. So therefore, I wouldn't believe that time exists anyway. I said earlier, time isn't linear. That's just my take on things. It's interesting that people have been talking about that theory for years, David Icke and others. It's interesting now that in recent, particularly in the last 2 years, researchers from various academic institutions are now coming forward, including a guy called Rich Terrell from NASA, who spoke to me a few weeks back on the program, still a big cheese at NASA. And they're now beginning to claim, in fact, that the universe is a holographic projection. What we see exists only because we choose to look at it. Where are you with that, Linda? How does that fit in to what you've been researching and writing about for years?
My 90-minute lecture at Contact in the Desert in May at Joshua Tree is going to be on that very subject. And part of the work that I'm doing is this universe somebody else's computer simulation? What about all of the recent news? I'm focusing on 3 rings that have come through astronomers and astrophysicists in just the last 2 years, having to do with anomalies in the universe that appear to possibly fall into the category of signaling, intelligent signaling. And I've interviewed people directly, the scientists who are doing the work, and that's what I will be using in this lecture. And then there is what is known as Tabby's star, KIC, with a bunch of numbers. It's called the Kick star. And she is an astronomer at Yale and has been studying for about 3 years a strange brightening and dimming on a star several hundred light years from here. But the dimming and the lighting falls into another hypothesis that is in the Kardashev scale. This was a Soviet scientist who, in answer to the question, how would we on Earth, in this solar system, in this backwater of the Milky Way galaxy, ever be able to discern intelligence of any kind in a 13.9 billion light year universe? What would we look for? And one of the characteristics on the Kardashev scale, and Michio Kaku at NYU talks about this, and Hawking has talked about this, and others, that if something has a periodicity of high dimming and high brightening, or I should say very low dimming and high brightening, and in this case, this particular star, just in the last year, the research has been published. I've done interviews with people associated with this work. One of the dimmings was as much as 22%. There's been nothing like it. There's nothing like it in the astronomical literature anywhere. And scientists, astrophysicists, and astronomers began saying, what if this is like the Dyson, as another famous scientist who proposed that if you get to a civilization advanced enough, like Michio Kaku would call it, civilization 1, 2, 3, and 4, and when you get into 3 and 4, you're talking about civilizations that not only bend space and time, they harvest all the energy they need right from the suns. And they do that by building large structures that will orbit an entire sun, and they have all the energy they need for billions of years. And that is actively right now a question about this star. Now, in that context, the holographic universe, it was around 1990, maybe 90, I know it was 91 because the book had just come out. That's it. Michael Talbot had written a book called The Holographic Universe. And I was at a conference, I believe it was in Nebraska or Missouri, and Bud Hopkins and I were speakers there. And when we were going to the airport and getting on the airplane, we realized we were on the same flight. And we sat next to each other. And this book, The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, was a great sensation at that time. And Bud said, I want to tell you something in confidence. Michael Talbot is one of my cases in the human abduction syndrome that I'm studying, and he had already written Missing Time, the book. And he said, here is what Michael told me is the truth about his book, The Holographic Universe, that had just come out, that the entire book was a telepathic download from the extraterrestrial biological entities that were abducting Michael and teaching him.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating. That he would say that. If it is a holographic projection, it changes everything, doesn't it? Because in any projected holographic universe that presumably is controlled by the architect of it, space and time wouldn't exist, and anybody who wanted to move within it would basically just consciously project themselves from one place to another without having to worry about time or a vehicle of any description. That's fair to say, right?
Well, you're asking a very, very intelligent question about a very, very complicated physics. I read just recently, because I'm doing all this work to do these presentations at conferences, back in the spring, April, I believe it was, of 2016 in New York, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who picked up the reins of Carl Sagan and has been doing this follow-up on the Cosmos series on TV, and Elon Musk of Tesla, who wants and is determined to have a settlement on Mars by 2026, says he wants to die on Mars. There were others there. The whole conference in New York City was around the question, are we living in a computer simulated universe? Elon Musk said that he would wager 1 billion to 1 this is not a natural universe. Now, others who were there, and there have been many, many, many articles about that amazing panel in New York in the spring of 2016, others have brought up this point that if we are in a holographic universe, that has to do with the physical structure of the universe and the implication that something beyond our comprehension was able to create an experiment like in a lab. But as far as Richie, Linda, listeners, trees, birds, water, earth, it does not make any difference because this is the universe we're in. But it means to me a fascinating question. How big are the intelligences in this universe? And Goot at Harvard says there are an infinite number of matter universes nestled within each other or in some sort of complex arrangement, and that each universe has dimensions associated with those universes. A dimension, a different dimension, is defined as, in this universe, Planck constant is the diameter distance between quarks at the center of an atom. If you changed that Planck constant distance between those quarks a trillionth of an inch, you would create a universe that this universe and that universe could never interact with each other. That everything is frequency, that everything relates to the subatomic structure writ large. This universe could be a hologram because scientists working in a lab in another dimension even could have set this universe in motion to study specific questions. Then we and all life in this universe, we become part of this grand experiment. But to us, we're simply trying right now to even understand the origins of standing up primates on Earth. And everything I've been exposed to, documents that I have read with my own eyes, people that I have talked to in military and intel, and going back to the home box office documentary I was working on back in 1983. I was shown a document, and it allegedly was presented to, it was told many years later, to President Carter, Jimmy Carter. And now I was reading in 1983 at Kurland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, and this paragraph said, extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien. All questions and mysteries about the evolution of Homo sapien on this planet have been answered, and this project is closed.
This is fascinating stuff, Linda, and the time is flying by, and there are a lot of tweets and questions about crop circles and things that we haven't had the time to get to. It's exactly 16 minutes to the top of the hour. We've got Linda for another 8 minutes maximum. So if we're energy at our purest form, if we're infinite awareness and we're consciousness, and you and I are having the experience of Linda and Richie within this holographic projection, the central questions are, who or what is the architect of it? Is it a prison? I found it very interesting what you just said there a second ago, because when Rich Terrell from NASA was on the show, he said, like you said, I wonder, he said, if future versions of us have created it. Now, that's one of those that if you think about that, it'll make your head spin as well. But I put it to him, and he was prepared to accept it as a strong or a reasonably strong possibility that at some stage this projection that we are, observing and experiencing was dreamt up, was designed to enslave us, to entrap us, to prevent us from ever understanding our own capability, Linda. And it was amazing to hear a guy like him and others say, yeah, I'm prepared to accept that as a possibility. And rather than accept that or think that maybe some benevolent force has created it, in fact, it might very well be malevolent. It might very well be sinister. These are incredible questions, right?
Yes, and I have a very interesting insight for you from a scientist who is also an abductee. This goes back to the early 1980s. He was one of the cases that Bud Hopkins was studying. I interviewed him for a long time, and we have been friends to this day. He has never wanted to be identified. He was a multi-million-dollar lab owner in New Jersey at the time. He was abducted. I won't go into all of the complexities. At one point, as a scientist, the beings that had taken him showed him a three-dimensional holographic screen. At least those would be the words as close as we could come to something that was three-dimensional and seemed to have a lot of stars and starry related images in it. And then as the ET brought the scientist up to this three-dimensional, would be a hologram there inside of this craft, the being said, look, I'm going to show you what you all do not understand about your universe. And then this hologram just changed, and there were five pairs, very neat rows, 2 rows, each universe. These were 10 universes paired. So 5 pairs, if you can get this in your mind's eye, however that comes into your mind. The being said, this is the universe you're in. And what you don't understand are all of these couplings to other universes. In your unit, you're one of 10 universes. And at the moment of what you call death, it is necessary that the soul, which is defined in a lot of abduction cases as an absolute reality. It is like a physical substrate that can record perhaps an infinite number of frequencies from lifetimes. And that, he said, the soul has to change charge for what occurs next. And he said that's what you all describe in your literature as the tunnel and the light. He said what's happening is that all souls that are in this universe at the moment of death, because you're in a universe of entropy and all energy winds down, they go through a transition into this paired universe, and he points to the one hooked onto this one on the right. In this universe, everything is exactly the opposite. The skies are white, the stars are black, there is no entropy. Anything that you could throw, it's not going to break. And he said, you come out of this universe where entropy has taken you down to zero, and you come into this universe and everything takes you back to life again in the anti-entropy universe. And he said there can be no direct interface or communication between these two universes because it would be self-annihilating. But that there is the perspective of the ET showing the scientists this group of 10 universes, and that the soul is on an eternal, like a loop going between these two universes, and did not explain about the other, what would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, did not explain the other pairs, the other 4 pairs. Now, to make this even expand your mind more, and I think about this a lot, he said he was given the concept that the only souls in this entropy universe are souls that were sent in here by a divine field to be able to recycle out into the universe next door, because this was a universe that was specifically made by the divine field to be the holder of something that we would consider negative, that does not have souls that recycle into the universe next door. Think about that, Richie.
It's incredible stuff, Linda. You know, I'm going to recommend to our listeners that I've tweeted out where they can find tickets to Awakening here in Manchester, where you, along with Eric Von Daniken and Gary Heseltine and many others will be speaking about these subjects. I want to mention again the website is Earth Files, by the way. That's earthfiles.com. Links there to all the documentation Linda spoke about, plus her books as well. Exciting times, Linda. We're in exciting times. You know, I have a feeling that we're closer to the truth maybe than any generation previously that came before us. And I'm excited about that.
Amen.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I think so. Are you looking forward to coming to Manchester? Have you been? I know you've been in the UK before. I know you've done stuff on British TV. Have you been to this city before? Do you know much about it?
No, I've never been up from the Wiltshire South area because I did all these years of crop formation investigations. And I am so looking forward. Mike McGinnis, who has been the organizer of Awakening, he just seems like such a great guy. And people who have been emailing me that they're going to be coming. I am truly excited. And I hope listeners today will come and shake my hand, because those of us who are trying to reach beyond the old paradigms to what the truth is, we should all meet and support each other.
Linda, great to chat with you. I'll be definitely saying hello to you when on the let me just reiterate the date. It's the 4th of March 2017, of course, this year, a full day with Linda, with Eric Von Daniken, Gary Heseltine and others. I've been invited, so I can't wait to say hello to you both. Thanks for coming on the programme, and enjoy the rest of your day, and more power to you. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, and God bless everybody.
Fantastic. Linda Moulton Howe on the line to us there from her home in New Mexico.